Suicide is a tough topic, but the Washington County Reach for Hope Suicide Prevention Coalition wants you to know that there is always hope. We are a caring community reaching out to provide compassion and hope for a community free of suicide. In the next half hour, we'll talk with community partners to identify risk factors, raise awareness, and discuss prevention strategies. Hello and welcome to another edition of Reach for Hope, where there's always hope. I'm Melissa Anderson. You know, all month, the month of September, we've been talking about and recognizing National Suicide Prevention Month. And last week in St. George, the American Foundation for the Prevention of Suicide held its annual Out of the Darkness Walk, along with hundreds of other cities across the country. This movement is an event that brings unity to suicide awareness so that we can all be open to talk about it and talk about our struggles, loss, and prevention. With me today is Misty and Valencia, who are both huge supporters for those who have lost loved ones. Welcome to both of you, and thanks for joining me today. Sure appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity.
Thanks for having us,
Yeah. Now, I met you guys at the Suicide Walk, Suicide Prevention Walk, the Out of the Darkness Walk by AFSP. And I was really enthralled to hear about your walk efforts and why you were involved in this. But more importantly, I'm so sorry for your loss. So if you could tell me a little bit about your passion, Misty, about why you guys are so passionate about prevention of suicide.
Yeah, thank you. We lost our son, Alejandro Valencia, 16 years old, in April, on the 21st of 2020. And he really struggled with suicide ideation and depression. And we thought we were doing everything that we could, getting him all the help we thought he needed. And right in the midst of COVID pandemic, school shut down. And all of his outlets shut down. The gym he was going to that helped with his mental health shut down. He wasn't allowed to go with his friends. And all of his support just kind of stopped, and the world kept going. My husband works at a restaurant, and I work at the hospital, and our jobs were essential, and we kept going and just didn't really understand the effect that the pandemic was having on him. And really looking back, like hindsight's 2020, but it was a perfect storm for his mental health to diminish. And when that happened during COVID, there wasn't a lot of support in the community. Everything shut down, any support groups that were running stopped. So we just really understood that the community really needs a place to go after a loss like this, to talk to those who have lost someone by suicide, and just be able to support each other. And talk about it. So.
And that was a terrible time because the students were in isolation. Even elderly people were at home in isolation. They were telling you, no, don't go places, stay home if you're sick, stay home if you've gotten COVID, whatever. And so I think you're not alone in that time frame. And I'm sorry for your loss of Alejandro. I mean, I'm sure he was a great kid. And it's a struggle because, we don't know what's going through someone's minds, and oftentimes when we're busy and we're caught up in the moment, we don't think about how do we deal with it, or you don't even know something's going on. So I appreciate you sharing your story. I want to talk a little bit about the walk and how you supported that. I saw you guys had a whole team, Luis, there, and you had his name on the back, and you had a lot of people in gray T-shirts out there.
Yeah, it was great. I think we ended up getting about 45 roughly people, friends and loved ones who, are dear to us and want to support the cause, and, show support in two ways. Obviously for us and losing our son, and a lot of them knew him as well. And so that part was easy for them to make sure that they're involved and want to offer support. And I think the second piece was helping be a part of this walk, in that we're hopefully spreading awareness and minimizing and trying to really kind of chip away at the stigma that is suicide. And I think, as we saw there, it really does affect way more people than I think we realize. I know for myself and Misty as well, prior to us losing our son, we didn't really know anybody. Well, we didn't think we did, I should say. Know anybody personally who would have been affected, because no one talks about it. And then come to find out, two of our close friends had been affected by suicide in their lives, and friends who we spent a lot of time with and hang out with and did lots of things together, and we never knew because no one talks about it. And so I think it was great to see a big piece of our community. I mean, for however big that may have been, it's more than it would have been had we not been affected in some capacity.
Yeah.
So it was very it was great to be there and see the community show up for it too, and I think there is a lot of healing and connecting with others who have been through the same and can genuinely empathize with how you're feeling and how you have felt.
Right. So there's a whole community out there, as we talked about. I mean, sorry, we have to wrap around that
Right.
that as our object or subject, but like you said, people aren't talking about it, and we're talking about it, and we need to get that word out that it's okay to talk about it, because back in the day, there was a stigma, and we're trying to break that stigma. So I'd like to talk to you now about how you guys have managed to get support in your lives and for other people's lives. You have a support group called Loss, correct? Tell us a little bit about that Loss support group here in St. George, when it was started, and how you guys got involved with that.
Yeah, so one of the friends Luis was just mentioning has lost a sister to suicide. And his mom and sister and himself, they lived in Salt Lake at the time. They started this group back in 2010. And that was the very first chapter. And we actually reached out to see if she would mind us sharing a little bit of her story and how that started. And then, so Lisa's going to read that, and then I'll kind of talk about how we got involved.
Sure. Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So it was shortly after the death of her daughter, Talise, to suicide. May Bradley and her husband Tom, they moved to Virginia for Tom's contract work in Orlando. At Quantico. She was looking for a safe place to process her grief and find support, and they were in Virginia. She ended up finding a small peer-led suicide loss support group at a church, in the basement of a church. And once their contract was up, they came back to Utah, and she realized that there was a need for that in the community. And so she ended up founding the loss support group and opened up the Salt Lake chapter. And there's now 5 chapters here in the state of Utah.
That's great. So how many people are coming? When do you meet? And what does a loss support group do?
Yeah, so we meet on the 3rd Tuesday of the month, just locally here at our hospital, at St. George Regional Hospital. Down in the basement, there's a conference room called Angel's Landing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that's where we meet. We have anywhere from 5 to 15 people every month that come. It's really a peer-led support group, and we are able to just lean in and talk about our feelings and what's going on, and support each other. It's not a replacement for therapy or anything like that, but it's so helpful to be able to talk to those who have a similar loss, and to know they understand what you're going through, because they also have lost somebody to suicide, and understand there is hope, and we can lean in on each other and support each other.
Yeah, and I think one of the big words we think about is postvention, right? Suicide postvention, and trying to make sure that people who have been personally affected do have an outlet, because there is now a higher likelihood of suicide to those that have been impacted by suicide. And so really trying to be a source of support for anyone in the community who, regardless of their background or religious affiliation, like none of that matters outside of human to human, and we're sharing in our loss and able to hopefully talk about our loved ones and help each other.
How difficult has it been then, Luis, for you to talk about it? I mean, it's been a little over 2 years, but how has that been? How hard is that to tell total strangers? And in some case, it might be easier, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that in having a conversation, a raw and sometimes a heavy conversation. There's definitely a bit of, it's easier to talk to strangers in that sense. And I think initially, even before this lost group that we were able to be a part of, even having conversations dealing with my son's loss was initially really hard. And I think because of the weight of the trauma and the grief and the guilt, you as a parent, losing a child, right? It's so unnatural. And then when it comes to suicide, I remember early on just feeling it's a weird kind of like it's kind of like survivor's guilt, but guilt and happiness. That was a strange thing, and it was very real for me. And I think as we are able to talk about it more and more, obviously, it becomes easier to discuss it. And there was a time where I had a really hard time because I felt so much anger at like the universe, not towards anybody in particular. I just anger, which was really grief, but it was manifesting as anger, and I had to really kind of do a deep delve and spend some time going over, writing down how I'm feeling, trying to talk to. We were very fortunate to be able to begin counseling right away. And it took a lot of work, and I think I was able to, and I've been able to, fortunately, really look at the time that I had with my son. I think the natural way of looking at it is through a lens of I don't get to do these things anymore, right? You have milestones, or you talk about a holiday or whatever it may be, and I think initially that became a point of hurt for me because I saw it as I no longer got to do these things. And so over a lot of work, I now can look back and see it from I was able to have those experiences for the time that I had. And so it's a weird way to see it, but I think the shift from the pain to a shifting of gratitude was instrumental for me. And that helps me to be able to spread the word and actively engage with people and try to talk. And I think in a kind of pretty messed up way, my son really, really elevated my sense of empathy and compassion towards others, right? Because we just don't know what people are going through. And so,
that's right.
as trivial as it may seem, and we put more weight into these situations or exchanges with people and what they're doing, and we get upset because they didn't use their turn signal, or they can't remember their PIN when they're checking out at the grocery store, like all these things, and we just don't know. Like they may have had some serious news just given to them. They may, who knows, and and I find myself now just being able to just be way more patient and understanding about little things that weren't.
So you kind of moved from a sense of feeling cheated to appreciation, which even though it's kind of a sad way to look at it, it really did happen that way. Mom, tell us about how you have been dealing with this and what kind of support you can offer for other mothers out there who maybe feel the same way.
Yeah, as a mother, I really struggled with the guilt of not recognizing that my son was deteriorating or, just in this really bad depressive state, and which led to a suicide. And I just played that game over and over of the what ifs, like what if I would have noticed this, or what if this, and it's really not fair. Like I've gotten to a point in my therapy that I realized that's just not a fair way to live my life. That's not very kind. And I have to remind myself, like, I was doing the best I could with what I knew at the time. And a lot of us, all these mothers are doing the exact same. Like, if love could have saved our kids, they'd still be here. And so it's not for a lack of that, you know? So be kind to yourself, give yourself grace and compassion, because you couldn't have prevented this.
Yeah, I hate to use the word prevention sometimes, and because it's kind of a struggle or a stretch, because you don't know what's going through that person's mind, and no matter what you do, and especially for kids, then they might not want to reach out to their parents. And so that's probably the last person they want to reach out to, because they don't want to. I don't know if it's a feeling of sense of shame for themselves, or if they just, don't want to listen to their parents, but that's just how kids kind of can be. And so that blame, you can't play that blame game. It just doesn't work for whatever reason. They were taken too soon, and that's a sad state of affairs to have to deal with. And so I'm once again sorry for your loss. This Out of the Darkness walk actually brought community together, brought you guys together. You met people that you didn't know from before. How have you reached out to people with your support loss group? You guys had a booth there. Tell us about, did you reach out and get more people to possibly come?
Yeah, I actually had a couple coworkers there at the walk, and we didn't know that either one of us had a loss. And so I've been able to connect with them at work and check in on them and give them more information and let them know, like, we're here in the basement of this same hospital on the third Tuesday of the month, and I'm here, just a text away. Like, I get it. So it was really cool to see, friends that I work with and connect that way. We've also had a couple other people that are interested in the group reach out and ask questions. So that's been awesome.
Yeah, and even with that, so we had some of these little like cards, flyers with the information, and I mean I have some in my car with me at all times, and so it was really an extension of what I feel like we do pretty regularly, and if we hear of someone struggling or has had a loss in their life, even if it's a while back, I think we try to make it a point to at least connect with them and just let them know that if they're ever interested, there's a group that gets together once a month and here in St. George at the hospital, and you can just sit and listen. If you don't feel like sharing, that's totally fine too. I think it was great to be able to have a booth there with information, because I felt like we were able to field several questions from people walking by and stopping us, and hopefully, even if they don't come, maybe they share that news with someone else too, right? So the goal for us is to just really spread the awareness so we can let people know that there is a place for them to be able to come.
Yeah, people should feel welcome to be able to express their feelings, even as difficult as it is. And the resources that you talked about they're out there, but sometimes you don't think about where to turn or who to turn to. And that's part of what Reach for Hope for, suicide prevention does too, is try to get those resources in the hands of people that need them at the time that they need them. It's a tough thing, because we're talking about trauma and PTSD in the lives of the family members that are left and friends. I mean, because like you said, no matter how long ago this may have occurred, something's going to trigger that, and you're going to still remember that. So what you got to try to do is not beat yourself up. And I don't know what kind of advice you might have for people on that, but that guilt sometimes can eat people. And I don't know how you talk about that in your support loss group, but I would imagine that's a big part of it, right, Misty?
Yeah, it is a big part of it. And I have this mantra that I just keep telling myself when I get down like that, like, you were doing the best you could with what you knew. And sometimes it'll help me flip out of that negative mindset. But just to be able to talk to people, and you always see it differently in your own mind, but when you hear somebody else say it, it doesn't sound right. So it's easier to be there for somebody, and when they're talking about their loss and I'm being hard on myself, it's really easy for me to say, well, that's not kind. That's not something that you would say to a friend. So why do you say it to yourself? Why do you allow those thoughts to manifest and, be your reality? Like, be kind to yourself, and treat yourself with compassion, because that's important.
Yeah. What kinds of things then do you both do to try to remember Alejandro besides the walk? And I mean, I don't know how else you think about him and how you can have him, feel closer and know that he's okay and that you're okay, and to bring this to kind of a closure, even though you probably never get the answers.
Yeah, I think so for his service, memorial service that we did, we ordered these bracelets to be made, like hundreds of them, so we can have them available, and just kind of like wristbands like they gave out at the our darkness walk, right?
Nice.
So ours are pretty faded, and we've been through a handful of them already. But I think it's a reminder, right? Like I've just thought again of I want to honor the memory of my son, and to be able to do that, it's to be able to show compassion towards others and talk about it as much as possible. I think that's one of the misconceptions that people will have common, and I understand it. I get the hesitation, right? They think it's going to make me uncomfortable, or they're going to put me, they're going to bring back a painful memory. But I think to anyone who has lost a loved one, I think it's the opposite of that. Right? There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it, and we don't think about them. What we don't want is for others to forget about them. And so I think I love to be able to talk about my son, and I when I know someone has lost someone, I make it a point to try to, have that conversation and engage and learn about them and hear some stories, because I think we want to be able to relive those memories as best we can, because that's all we have now, right?
Right. And so if you could share anything with us about him, what would that be?
Alejandro had such a great sense of humor, and he was such a great dancer. One thing that he did is he put a playlist together, and so I'll listen to that and just jam out and just remember like his dance moves and just that funny sense of humor.
Yeah, I was always same. I think he had such a phenomenal sense of humor, and almost above his age. The jokes that he would make and laugh about, and such an avid reader. I remember just being blown away. I always thought I was a fast reader, and then seeing him just burn through books was something different too, and all very impressive. So we have like I don't know, shrine may not be the right word, because that sounds a little creepy, but
yeah,
we have a place just outside our bedroom, just kind of a little alcove in the wall, that we have a picture of him, and we have his ashes there, and just things that we kind of milestones from his life. And so we see that every day coming out of a room, and I love to be able to show it to people. So if anybody asks, I happily go through it and what everything means on there, because it gives me a chance to, talk about my son again.
Yeah, and this support group allows other people to talk about their loved ones that they've lost, and I think that's so important, because some people think, oh, you don't want to talk about it, like you said, but you really do, because that actually is therapeutic for you guys, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we mentioned earlier there's still a lot of stigma around suicide, and I think even mental health. It's great that we have the fact that we have mental health awareness. I mean, companies are coming out and talking about it, right? We have a new hotline for them to be able to reach out. Like it's such a bigger part of our communities and our lives than it used to be, because we're talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we want to, be able to take every opportunity that we can, because that's how we eat away and chip away at that stigma and that pain that people will have, is talking about it.
All right. Well, I'd just like to thank both of you for joining us today, and encourage others to reach out for help. One more time on just the date. Is it the second or third Tuesday?
It's the third Tuesday of the month. Just at the local hospital, St. George Regional Hospital.
At what time?
7 p.m.
7 p.m. All right. Well, hopefully people will be looking forward to seeing you there, and that you'll be there and can help other parents pull through this, or people who have lost people. So thank you so much for sharing your story today. And, you know, what people need to realize out there is that they aren't alone, right?
Right.
Right.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and we hope you have a great day. And remember, there's always hope. The Reach for Hope Coalition wants you to know that we care about you and we are here to help. If you or someone you know is thinking about suicide, reach out. You're not alone. To access resources for yourself or others, visit our webpage at reachforhopeutah.org. That's reach4hopeutah.org. If you are experiencing a crisis,
Please call or text the Suicide Crisis Lifeline at 988.
because you matter and there is always hope.
This has been a production from a podcast studio.